Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to another exciting session as we continue to prepare for our upcoming National Grade 6 examination. Now, in trying to understand the story, it is more than being able to read the words. It is also important to understand the elements that make up that story. Now, I know that we would have focused a lot on elements of stories in our composition sessions, but it is also important in our reading sessions. Now, remember, some of the stories are not stories that you would have written, but it is important that you understand how the writer would have gone about planning what they would have planned in order to make this story or to put this story together. So in other words, what you have to try to do with what the writer put together is to break it apart and identify the various elements in story writing. So what I'm saying is that you have to try to figure out who was or were the characters in the story, the conflict or high point of the story, the setting, the theme or main ideas in the story. So in doing this, we say that we are looking at the outline of the story. So today for our session, we're going to be looking at story outline. Remember, it is one thing to build from scratch, but it is another thing to study and report accurately on how something created by someone else was built. I think that's an extra skill that you could develop. So let our lesson begin. Now today, we're going to be revisiting the story of the garbage collectors, and we're going to be looking at the story outline. So what exactly is the story outline? A story outline is a way for writers to organize the event of their story before they actually write it. But today, as I said, we're going to try to identify what were the things in terms of the elements in the story that we would have read. Now, why is it important to do story outline? It helps you when you're not sure where to begin or how to continue the story. Outlining your ideas can help you to put one word in front of another. So the story outline is also considered to be a sturdy bridge between your story ideas and a polished work in writing. So there are different elements, as I said, and we would have covered them, but let's review them. These elements include setting, and we learned that the setting refers to where and when the story is taking place or has taken place. Then we have characters. Characters refers to persons or animals in the stories, or sometimes it could be an object. We have the conflict. The conflict is the problem in the story. Then we have solution, how the conflict was solved. We have the rising action, or I like to say the high point, events that lead up to the climax. And then we have the climax, which is the highest point of the story. And finally, to end the story, we have our conclusion, which, as I just said, is what happens in the end. Now, you might want to say that climax and conflict, they go hand in hand. Sometimes they do, sometimes they can be a little different. Now, as I said before, we're going to be reviewing the story of the garbage collector. It's going to be a little more challenging because, remember, it's not the story that we wrote. So we're trying to break this story apart and try to identify those elements of story writing. Now, here is the story again. David was gazing through the window on Tuesday morning. "Here comes the garbage collectors," he shouted. "Mommy, did you put all the garbage in the drum?" "No, David. Please empty the plastic bag into the garbage drum quickly," Mistress John said. David obeyed his mother and ran immediately to the gate. Two men were taking the galvanized lid off the drum. One was whistling a happy tune. "Good morning. Wait a minute, please," David said, as he emptied the plastic bag with the rubbish into the drum. David watched the garbage collectors as they worked. He noticed that they were wearing thick, heavy gloves and dungaree overalls. The men turned each drum on its edge and rolled it round and round, then rolled it up to the end of the bridge and onto the street. There was a truck in front of the neighbor's house. The driver reversed the truck slowly and carefully up to the bridge. Two more men got out of the truck. The four men lifted the garbage drum and dumped the wet, slimy garbage into the back of the truck. David exclaimed, "Goodness gracious, your truck is almost full. What do you do when it can't hold any more?" "We usually drive the truck to a special place and dump the garbage. It helps to fill and build the land," the tallest man said pleasantly. "Do you collect garbage only from houses?" David asked. "No, son. We have to visit the hospitals, the abattoirs, the places where fish is cleaned daily," the man replied. "Why do you go there every day?" David asked. "The workers there throw away garbage that is smelly and that could make people ill. It is also an environmental hazard," the tallest man said. "Oh dear," David said. "Do you dump the garbage at a special place too?" No. We take it to the incinerator and burn it," another man said. "The what?" David asked. He thought it was a big word and he wanted to get it right. "The incinerator," the man replied with a smile. David repeated the word. "Thanks for telling me about the work of the garbage collectors of the city council," he said. "Goodbye now." The four garbage collectors climbed into the truck and they drove to the next street. Now let's see if we can identify the outline of the story by highlighting the different elements. So we'll use our questioning format. So what is the setting of the story? Now remember, if we're dealing with setting, we're dealing with where and when. So if you review the story, can you remember when it was that this story took place and where? What about the characters of the story? Who were the characters or who are the characters in the story? What was the conflict in the story? Think about how was the conflict solved? What was the climax? And what happened at the end of the story? Remember, by answering these questions, we are going to be able to address each element of the story and at the same time outline the story. Now let's answer those questions. What was the setting of the story? Or as I said, where? The story was set on a Tuesday morning. Where? In David's neighborhood. So that there describes the setting of the story. Who are the characters in the story? Now the characters in the story, if you were following and if you can remember, we had David being presented in the story. We had his mother playing a part, and then we had the garbage collectors. Now, was there one garbage collector? No, there were four garbage collectors. And what were they moving in? We had the garbage truck, driver. So those were our characters in the story. Now, what was the conflict in the story? Remember, the conflict is a problem. So let's see, can you remember what problem came up in the story? Yes, the garbage truck was almost full. So David wanted to know what would happen to the other people's garbage. Do you remember when he said, goodness gracious, your truck is almost full. He saw that as a problem. But was the problem solved? Were they able to solve it? Was David able to solve it? No, he wasn't. But the garbage collectors, who were the skilled persons in this job, were able to solve it. So let's see how the conflict was solved. One of the garbage collectors explained that they drive to a special place and they would dump it. So when the truck was full, they would go there, empty the truck, and they would come again. Now, what was the climax of the story? Remember, the climax is the high point. Now, the climax in this story was when David started to ask questions about the garbage, when he started to ask questions about the dumping, when he wanted to know why people dump and all of that. So the climax there was when David started to ask the garbage collectors questions about how and where they dump the garbage. Do you think that was the climax? Yes, it was. Remember, the men were working, but David was curious. So he started to ask questions. And now, what happened in the end of the story? Well, the men, they answered David's questions and he was quite pleased. And so David thanked the garbage collectors for telling him all about their work, and the garbage collectors went on to the next street and continued their work. And that was the end of the story. Well, I sure hope that you enjoyed this lesson and understanding how to build an outline for a story. In this case, I understand we didn't necessarily build, but we were able to analyze this story and find each part and connect it to the elements of story writing. We were able to identify the setting. We were able to identify the characters. We were able to figure out some of the high points or the climax, the conflict. We were able to also find the solution to the conflict of the story. And we were able to identify the ending of the story. So you did a good job. Remember, as you read, you can try to break down the stories and try. As you come up, you say, okay, this person is a character in the story. So they went to the market. The market is a part of the setting. It doesn't matter what story you read, you can find the elements of basic story writing. Again, be sure to use your textbook, find the story and other stories as well, and try to see if you could do your own story outline. This is all from me, your teacher, Ms. Shamsuddin, once again, saying goodbye and see you next time.